Welcome into the College Football Overtime Podcast. My name is Garrett Chapman. His name is Abe Gordon. We got a lot to get into because week one was one for the books. We had lots of wild action that took place in this one, including one team that might be hitting the panic button. We'll talk about them here in just a moment. We didn't have a chance to talk about them because they finished up on Monday. Weird time to play a college football game, but doesn't mean that they don't get a chance. Their time in the sun. They get a chance to shine here, and just not in any positive way. But we'll talk about it. Abe Gordon, Garrett Chapman here. As we preview all of the week two action that's going to be coming up this weekend, the NFL is back, but we won't talk about that here. We're all college football all the time. Abe Gordon, how you doing, buddy?
We are doing good, man. A lot of questions have been answered, but I think a lot more have been asked now that we are through a set of games for most teams, two for some. So, yeah, look, starting to whittle it down just a little bit. A couple teams have probably been eliminated from contending, but we'll see how that goes.
You know, I don't think any team has truthfully fully been eliminated. Nobody has. Florida State can still control some destiny. They just have to win some games.
Arkansas Pine Bluff, courty of a 70-point loss, probably
all right. Well,
probably not going to fight their way back in. But
Abe Gordon, you know what I mean. You know exactly what I mean. Florida State other teams that have lost, like LSU. LSU is a team that we talked about it on Sunday when we did our reaction show. I mean, that's a team that, they've lost their first game of the season multiple years in a row. They've still put together pretty solid seasons. In fact, they played in an SEC championship game just 2 years ago. So not hitting the panic button for those teams, but one team who is hitting the panic button has to be Florida State. I didn't think this team was going to be very good this year. I thought they were going to take a little bit of the step back. You lose your quarterback, you lose your wide receivers, you lose a big chunk of your defense. But Mike Norvell, we had him as a top 10 or top 10 coach in the class, like just in all of college football. And this has been a disaster start. 0-2. Lose in Dublin, 24-21 to Georgia Tech. That was a huge upset victory for the Yellow Jackets and Coach Frank Key. But then it doesn't look quite so big of a deal, because then they go at home, get blown out 28-13. I'm hitting the panic button if I'm Florida State. DJ Uiagalelei has been, let's just put it this way, he's been a disaster for Florida State. The Seminoles have been awful on offense. There's no other real way to put it. They're not running the ball well enough. We thought that this team was going to be able to run the ball effectively, at least enough to take some pressure off of DJU. But the nightmare scenario for Florida State this season was needing DJU to win them football games. He has not been good enough to barely keep them in football games, much less go win them. He had a chance to keep them, he kept them in the game against Georgia Tech. He was pedestrian in that one, but then against Boston College, he was downright terrible, missing wide open wide receivers, making his offense just objectively worse. I'm at a situation now, if there's not a QB battle, this season might be lost in Tallahassee.
Well, a couple of things. They need to run the ball more, and that's not necessarily on DJU, although obviously teams can deal with the run because they're not scared of the arm. I actually think they need to run DJU more. I think we saw at times, specifically most recently out in the Pac-12 there, he can be dangerous with his legs. I think he needs designed runs a lot more than he's getting. Here's the problem, Garrett, and you're right, like DJU, and that was the big question that we've all had. That was the one reason I was like, I don't think they're top 10 teams. I don't trust this guy. And that, that lack of faith has been paid off, at least in my circumstances, prediction wise. We've seen Brock Glenn, like we saw him at the end of the year last year. He's not very good either. It's not like they're cross-state rivals, the Florida Gators, who are going from Graham Mertz to a 5-star that everyone wants to see and has been waiting on. Brock Glenn is not much better. And so I agree with you. I think you have to consider a switch. I would imagine the leash for DJU is incredibly short moving forward. And maybe Brock Glenn gets in some of these games. But I don't think there's a ton of belief in him either. That's why they went and got DJU, is they don't believe in Brock Glenn. And so, it's an unmitigated disaster. You put the whole season in the hands of a quarterback that is not capable of performing to the level in which you called him in to perform at. And look, they're not good enough stopping the run. Boston College ran all over them a week after Georgia Tech ran all over them. And the game plan's out there. Like Boston College very clearly, and as they should, right, under Bill O'Brien, they studied that tape for Georgia Tech and said, look at what these guys are doing on the ground. I got a couple of hosses back here too. Let's see if we can do that on the ground. And guess what? They are. The defensive line has been a big letdown. We could talk about the lack of a run game and the quarterback play for Florida State offensively. The defensive line has been a disaster too. You can't have it. No offense to Tech, no offense to Boston College. Those teams should not be getting 200 plus yards on the ground against you. And so they got a long way to go to figure quite a lot of stuff out. But back to your original question. Yeah, I think the leash is very short on DJU, and I do start to wonder if you see Brock Glenn at least given a chance.
Yeah, I mean, this is the type of situation where we talked a lot about culture. We did it on Saturday when we talked on college football game time and kind of previewed this game and discussed it a little bit. And, you know, the biggest problem with Florida State is that they are using a model that it's novel, but you've never really seen it succeed over an extended period of time. You've seen it succeed year in, just a single year, but not year in, year out. You know, I mean, you look at what Mel Tucker did at Michigan State. They had a really successful year, and they go to a Peach Bowl, and they had a really good season. Then they fell off because they, you know, Kenneth Walker, guys like that, graduated. They were gone. And Florida State kind of, it seems like they have something very similar. But the big differentiator is that they had a guy under center who, Jordan Travis, who could legitimately ball. And he was the core of that team. He was the identity of that football team. And when he went down, they lost it. And the thing that has been consistent ever since that, they just haven't really been that good of a football team. They haven't. You saw them down the stretch against ACC competition and non-conference competition. I want to say it was like North Alabama or something like that, I don't remember who it was that they really struggled with. And again, they had absolutely no business losing or even being in a close competitive football game. They almost lost that game. They were terrible. And then you get blown out by 60 points in the Orange Bowl against Georgia. This team has no identity. There is no core. There's no leadership on this roster. That's just from an onlooker. Obviously, I'm not involved in that program. I don't know the comings and goings of their program necessarily, but based on all appearances, it lacks leadership and it doesn't have a core. And that partially comes from the top down. And you build up a core through strong recruiting. And you get guys who are in your program, who grow up through your program, and they become part of who you are as an identity of your football team. You see that with the best programs. And then you fill in the gaps with the transfer portal. You don't make up the entire identity, the DNA of your program through the transfer portal. That's a recipe for disaster. And I think Florida State has just been a perfect example of that fact. I mean, you look down this schedule, you have Memphis this week. You should win that football game. Emphasis on should. I don't know what to believe about Florida State anymore. Then you got Cal and ACC play. SMU, Rhett Lashley and company. That's not going to be an easy test for this team. Then you get Clemson, a team that you struggled with mightily over the last decade. Then it's Duke, which a game you should win. Miami, battle for Florida. Miami's going for a state championship, having just blasted Florida. They have a chance to come in here and blast Florida State. Then it's UNC, a team that can throw the ball all over the field. Of course, Drake May's not there anymore, and they're searching for that identity, but that's in November. Notre Dame. Then you get Florida, and a game that, I don't know, by that point, I don't think either team is going to want to play that game. This is a disaster for Florida State, and I don't think there's any way to put it.
Yeah, I don't want to overstate it too much, if we're being honest. Like, it's obviously a bad start. There's obviously an incredible upward path for you to now come anywhere close to contending for, a playoff spot or anything like that. But I don't know if it's quite as
it's bad. I don't.
It's not good, but I think
it.
we're overstating it a little bit. I mean, it's tough to justify the start, but this is a guy that had this team in position to make the playoffs last year. I don't know.
Yeah, then you graduated your entire team.
It doesn't matter. I don't think you just wholeheartedly dump on the culture of a team that was undefeated last year. I feel like that's a bit strong. Sure. At the same time, this is a guy that entered that undefeated season on the hot seat a year ago before flirting with Alabama and getting a new deal and all that stuff. So, it's a mess. The question is it so far gone that they can't find ways to correct it? And I'm just not quite ready to say that just yet.
Yeah. We'll see what ends up happening with Florida State. Of course, they still have 10 more games to go.
And by the way, like Georgia Tech's in the rankings 23rd. Like we haven't seen a ton of Boston College. I know you and I are both high on Castellanos. Like there's also a world where Boston College is just taking a massive jump in year one under Bill O'Brien. And we're just looking at it from the FSU perspective. There's a world in which Boston College is legit and we just didn't know it yet. That's another aspect of just time will tell on that one. Not sure that that's a selling point that I'd try and make if I were Mike Norvell. Like they might be really good, but there is some possibility to that as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, you're exactly right. The story of this season has not been told. It's just getting started. This is literally chapter 1. Like we are not even close to a final story on what the eventual story of this season is going to be. You know, I mean, last year, Oklahoma State, I think, starts 1-3 or something. Ollie Gordon has 26 carries in that early part of their season. They go on to play in a Big 12 championship game and completely change the course of their season. He's a Heisman finalist. He's just an unbelievable player. And then now they're riding high. They're a top 15 team. I mean, things happen. LSU, I mentioned it earlier to kick off the show. This is a team that lost its first game, finished the season 10-2, but beat Alabama, played in an SEC championship game. The story of this season has not yet been written. I'm just basing everything that I've seen on Florida State. Everything that I've seen from them has not looked good. It's all been bad. And then it's just, maybe I am piling on. Maybe I am reacting to just the recency bias of this situation, but it's been a disaster. It's been about as bad of a start as possible, but you're right. 10 games remain for this team. They can right the ship to some degree. You just need some sort of positive momentum.
They got to find it. They just got to look within.
You have to find something. You got to dig deeper.
You got to get your foothold somewhere, whether that's trusting your defense, whether that's making your quarterback more mobile and you got to find something that works for you and then start to build from there. They've got to answer at least one or two questions though, before they can really move forward.
Yeah. I mean, I asked this question about every team entering every single season, every team that I legitimately see as a contender or a team that could legitimately contend throughout the course of the season. What are you elite at? Are you elite at anything? As of right now, Florida State, I don't see as an elite football team in any one capacity. I thought that they were going to be elite at running the football and stopping the run. And then they would be able to figure things out as the season's gone on. Neither of those things have come to pass. And maybe that's why I'm reacting in the way that I am, because I had those expectations for those two units. And since they have not delivered even in the slightest, it's been tough. It's been tough for Florida State. But let's move on, because there's a lot of college football that we need to preview here. This is our preview show. We haven't previewed the game yet. We've just reacted. So while you're here, actually, you're watching on Twitter, you're watching on YouTube, you're listening online, make sure you like, make sure you subscribe. We're not going anywhere, but you know what? It helps us and helps us makes us feel like we're doing a good job. So like and subscribe, follow us along all season long, college football overtime. One big game. It's the big noon kickoff. Texas at Michigan in the big house. The defending national champions are a home team, and they're 7.5-point underdogs in this game. Texas, of course, had a big first week. Michigan, not quite so much. Kind of a tough start for the defending champs against Fresno State, and it's a rare matchup between these two teams. It's the only second one. Two teams who were both in the playoff last year. Of course, like I mentioned, Michigan having won a national championship. They won 23 consecutive home games, Abe. I know you hate terms like that and thoughts like that, but 23 consecutive home games is a very impressive mark. And I don't know if I believe in Michigan in this game. They've got an uphill climb. But like I mentioned about Florida State, what are you elite at? Michigan's elite, very elite on defense. They have an incredible secondary. They have an awesome defensive line with 2 All-Americans, preseason All-Americans, and then they have a rushing attack that could be one of the best in college football. I don't think that they are going to be nearly the team that they were last year. That doesn't mean that they can't hold on to the football, play to home field advantage, and give Texas a run for their money, maybe even win this football game. What say you?
Yeah, I don't buy their week 1 performance at all. 20 points is not how close that game was. Michigan's got a quarterback problem. And I know they went with Davis Warren to start things, and he threw for 118 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Alex Orji came in at the goal line and threw a touchdown. He ran for 32 yards. They got to figure out what they're doing under center. Look, you can tell me about how elite their defense is, and maybe they prove it this week by hosting Texas. But that is also an elite unit on the other side with Quinn Ewers and Texas coming in. Michigan's going to have to score in this game. And like I said, the 30 points they put up against Fresno State, I feel is incredibly misleading. You know, a lot of it was in the fourth quarter. They obviously got a pick six, which helped buoy that game. But to me, this was not an impressive opening performance for Michigan, and it made me ask a lot more questions. They're going to have to score in this game. I just don't think this is a game that they can grind out 24-21. I think Texas is going to be able to get over them. And I agree with you. What was supposed to be, as you term it, elite at Michigan was not in week one. When I look at Donovan Edwards, I mean, this is a guy that was on the cover of EA Sports College Football, right? Mm-hmm. Like, he averaged 2.5 yards a carry, 27 yards total on 11 touches, a long of 7 yards. Like, this is the guy that's supposed to lead their offense. Like, he was the guy. Like, you don't get put on that cover by accident. They believed, EA Sports, that he is going to be one of the preeminent offensive stars in college football this season. 11 carries for 25 yards, or whatever the number was, with a long of 7. That's not going to get it done against Texas. And Texas has a very good defensive line, so Michigan's going to have to show up. But they got an issue at quarterback, and I just don't think that they're going to be able to hold Texas down. They're going to have to score in this game. I know Davis Warren went from the start. I think you're going to need a more mobile guy. I do wonder how quickly maybe we see Alex Orji in this one. And I know we've talked about two teams, and I've called for 2 quarterback changes. Look, we're going to talk about the Gators, and we're going to call for a third. Like, I promise I'm not – I promise that's not the path I'm trying to go down 1 week into the season, right? But when I have questions and I'm desperate for answers and it's a massive game at home, you got to pull out all the stops. And I think Michigan is going to have to figure something out because Texas is coming in. This is a message, Garrett. You got 63 first place votes spread out, and Georgia got the majority of them, and Ohio State got the rest. I think this is a call from Texas that says, hey, you guys can keep your focus there, but we're here too. And someone at some point is going to have to go through us if they're going to win the national championship. Mm-hmm. Now, that someone in the regular season we know is going to at some point beat Georgia at home for Texas. And so we'll get to the bottom of that when we get there. I think this is a wake-up call and a message and a notice to the rest of the country that despite Texas losing a lot to the NFL draft on the defensive line and in the receiver room last year, they are back, and they're going to have something to say about who wins this thing as well. I really like Texas, and quite honestly, Garrett, I don't think it's going to be that close, man.
Ooh. So Abe the Contrarian is looking for an orgy in the end zone. Got it. All right. So Texas Longhorns, of course, 7.5 point underdogs or favorites in this game.
And by the way, this game opened at 4.
Yeah, no, it's only gone up.
And at 4.
See, the thing is, I'm still pretty comfortable that Texas is going to cover the 7 points.
I am too, but like that's a wild number.
It's big. It's big, especially at the big house.
The 4 was a wildly low number in my opinion.
4 was massive. So if you got the number at 4, then congratulations to you. This isn't a betting show, and I'm not going to give you gambling advice necessarily. But if you got it at 4, that's a tremendous get for anybody out there. At 7.5, I'm still probably taking the Texas Longhorns to cover that number. I can see them winning this game by 10 plus points. And you named it. I don't think that they have a quarterback that can actually stress Texas enough. And that's just it. Because the over-under in this game, and I said it's not a gambling show, and I've now referenced multiple betting lines, but Vegas is generally pretty accurate, and it's a good basis of where you can start for what your expectations for a game can be. 42.5 is your over-under in this game. And Abe Gordon, what I'm getting from you is that you should take the over in this game because Texas, I mean, if you believe what you saw in week 1, they outpassed Colorado State 355-74. That's pretty good, last I checked. And you have 6 different players who had three or more receptions. Isaiah Bond, Isaiah Bond and Jonte Cook and Matthew Golden and Ryan Wingo. I'm like, these are guys who can get out and pop. And the problem here is Will Johnson can only cover one side of the field. Will Johnson might be the best defender in college football this year, the cornerback for Michigan. Texas has a bunch of dudes, man. I mean, you got a lot of people in that second that are going to give that secondary problems. And if Texas starts hitting some big plays once or twice, I think, and if they can build a lead, you take Davis Warren and this Michigan offense completely out of the game. I think the defense for Michigan is going to be enough in the early goings of this game. It's going to be a tight contest. But when it comes down to it, unless Michigan can get on the field and just sustain drives and they can win it with their physicality, which I don't think that they can do necessarily. Maybe if this is the old Texas, yes, not this new version of Texas. The new version of Texas is still a very physical bunch. But if Michigan can get out there and win the line of scrimmage, specifically looking at the Texas offensive line and the Michigan defensive line, but also on the flip side with the Michigan offensive line versus the Texas front seven, if they can win the trenches in this game, that is their only chance to win this football game, period. Point blank, period. But I still take Texas. I think they've just got more dudes. Quinn Ewers, we've gone this entire conversation and we've hardly talked about Quinn Ewers, which I think he could have an argument as one of the best pure players, especially at the quarterback position in all of college football. The guy has the makings of a top 5 draft pick. And I mean, this is going to be just a fun game. I think that there are a lot of storylines that are going to come out of this one. But look at that Texas offensive line. They returned 4 starters. And then the only guy who wasn't a starter is Cameron Williams, and he was just named the SEC's co-offensive lineman of the week. You know, their trenches are going to be strong. They're built to win football games like this. Steve Sarkisian built this team to move to the SEC and compete for championships. And that's what they were built to do. That is what they're going to try to do. And Michigan, I don't think they're going to have enough firepower to match. So I agree with you. I may not take the over on the 42.5, mostly because I just don't know how Michigan's going to score. And I don't think Texas is going to be able to just drop 30 plus points. I think this is like kind of a 24-10 type of score. That's my gut inclination on this one.
Yeah, and you mentioned it briefly, and you kind of ran right past it. This has to be an ugly grind out game for Michigan. Like if they're going to compete, they need to minimize the possessions that the Texas offense can have. They need to play very smart with the clock, especially at the end of the half, and make sure they don't get double dipped. Or if it's their receive on the second half, maybe they can find a way to double dip. They have got to play, in my estimation, as close to a brilliant, perfect game of football, because I just do not believe man for man on the field they are as talented at Texas, especially in the positions like quarterback where it matters most.
Yeah, this is the type of game where you use the word expose, and I think that's a good one. I think this is going to expose one way or the other the reality of the situation for both Texas and Michigan.
Yeah.
Either one, Texas is not what it's supposed to be on offense, and the skill guys are not what they were advertised to be throughout the course of the offseason. Quinn Ewers is still not arrived as a big game quarterback, as somebody, which I don't think is, I think that might be hyperbole, but I'm trying to like guesstimate what storylines would be after the fact. Even though he's been on the road and won big road contests in the past.
I think the storylines would probably be the receivers, right?
Like the other end. But if you're looking at the Michigan side of it, that they're just not the team that they were last year. Sherman Moore needed Jim Harbaugh, JJ McCarthy's gone, Blake Corum's gone, Roman Wilson's gone. You go down the list of players that they lost, and you say last year was fun, and they'll hang their hat on that for the next decade. Maybe not that bad, but at the end of the day, Michigan, I feel like it's just not the same football team. You talk about a team that didn't face a lot of adversity on the scoreboard technically last year, outside of maybe the Rose Bowl, but they were able to battle back and make have a really good performance in that football game. All those guys who did that, all of the key contributors in that game, they're in the NFL or they've just graduated. They're gone. It is what it is. We'll see what happens in that one. But one of the more underrated matchups that's also a top 25 versus top 25 is Tennessee and NC State. Another road contest for an SEC school, which I'm still getting used to calling Texas an SEC school, but that's neither here nor there. The other UT in the conference, the University of Tennessee, they're going on the road to Raleigh, North Carolina to take on the 24th ranked Wolfpack of NC State. And these are two teams who, again, had two very different week 1 reactions. Tennessee's riding high on the Nico train, which, I mean, how can you not? They quietly rushed for 304 yards on the ground, and then they had 718 yards of total offense in this game over UTC. It was unbelievable. That's what you're supposed to do against this type of competition. But, Nico Iamaleava, he is a Heisman type of guy. That is his potential. That is his ceiling. He has the potential to be one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC, if not the best quarterback in the SEC by the time this season, not next season, this season is done. Those are the expectations, and it could end up being the reality for Tennessee. On the other hand, NC State is a team that really struggled week 1 against Western Carolina. They were able to turn it on late. They scored 21 points in the fourth quarter. They won this game 38-21. Grayson McCall ended up playing pretty well. One person who really played well is Kevin Concepcion. Big threat guy, 9 catches, 121 yards, 3 touchdowns for him in week 1. But Jordan Walters is the guy who I am looking at specifically for NC State. He has to be big on Saturday, because if he is big, that means they're keeping the orange guys off of the field. That means you grind out possessions in a very similar type of way to what Michigan has to do against Texas. NC State has to do that against Tennessee. Keep them off the field. And then maybe Grayson McCall and Concepcion, they can hit you down the field maybe once or twice and really threaten what I think is not a very good Tennessee secondary. But look, I think this makes for a very interesting matchup. Dave Doran versus Josh Heupel. Hyper underrated coaching matchup in this one. I think this is going to be a compelling game.
Well, what's interesting to me is for NC State, you know who needs to step up. And you mentioned it. It's Waters on the ground and Concepcion through the sky, along with Grayson McCall playing another relatively smart game. Got off to a slow start, but it kind of grew into the offense as they went. The interesting thing from the Tennessee side is I'm not sure you know who is going to step up on a given day. I mean, you had Dante Thornton went over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns, but, Brew McCoy was a shade under 90. You got Squirrel White. And they had like 6 guys who had 4 or more carries for Tennessee. And obviously they were playing the mocks. They handled business. And so you got some second teamers who boosted the stats. The thing is, Tennessee knows who to attack defensively, who they need to prevent. I don't know if you have the same story in terms of Tennessee and how NC State can defend them. I think the big question there is obviously Nico, right? Yeah, he settled in nicely against Chattanooga. It's Chattanooga, like you should. The same way, again, we're going to talk about it shortly, the same way like DJ Lagway better look good against Samford, right? It's Samford. Like it's Chattanooga. You going into a true road game against a ranked team, against an ACC squad. They're not the toughest environment in the world, but it's not nothing either. And so as a freshman, this is a really big game for it to be the second game of the season. And there's a lot of pressure now and expectations now that they did perform the way that they did in week 1 and that Nico does look the way he did in week 1. How do you handle the moment for Nico? I mean, that's the next step in his evolution, right? I mean, physically, I'm not concerned. Mentally, how does he handle it? If it gets loud, is he able to receive play calls? If he's got to scramble, does he panic? Stuff like that. It's almost more off the field than it necessarily is on the field for Nico specifically. And then you're all over it with what you said about NC State. Make this an easy game for Grayson McCall. Get the run game going and hit the big plays to Concepcion. 3 touchdowns a week ago, and you'd like to see him have another double-digit game if you're a Wolfpack fan. This one's going to be really, really interesting. It is definitely a situation where McCall cannot start slow again.
No.
I don't think he can build into this game. Start slow, you build into the season, but now you're in game 2 with a highly ranked opponent at your spot. You have to be there from the jump. That's going to be what's interesting to me. I think if Tennessee gets out on NC State, it's going to be real difficult for McCall to come back on them. Whereas on the flip side, if Tennessee falls behind early, I think Nico can still throw them back into this game. So really, really good game, kind of. And you've mentioned it. It is kind of like an undercard, even though it's a nightcap in terms of Texas, Michigan's like the big high priority announced game. This one's a nice little sleeper at night, though. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah. And look, this is one of those games where Dave Doran needs to put on a coaching clinic. Like it just sort of needs to be that kind of game for NC State. And he's fully capable of doing that. Let me be the first to tell you. Definitely won't be the last either. But look, the Wolfpack, have a pretty good defense. They lost 2 of their top sack guys last year, but this is also a game that's been circled for NC State for a very long time. This is a big type of game for them because look, they don't have a lot of opportunities to impress on the national stage, not in the same way that Tennessee will later on in the season. Tennessee just sees this as another step, another game that you got to win. And I don't mean that with any disrespect to NC State either. It's just sort of the reality of where these two teams are in the national perception, that is. And I think NC State has a path to winning this game. They do. They just need to play a very good game. Like they need to play a really, really good game. But the number one thing that you need to do if you're NC State is slow down the rushing attack for Tennessee. Everybody liked to talk when Hendon Hooker was there 2 years ago. They had the number one passing attack and blah, 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 blah. They could do all this stuff through the air. They were a running football team, Abe. That was a team that wanted to run the football. The reason they lost a lot of the games that they did is because they could not run the football. That was it. That was the biggest thing. That Alabama team was not very good against the run that year. That Georgia team that beat the crap out of them was. And you saw the impact that it had. That's just sort of what this team wants to do. It's what Josh Heupel does. And that's the facade of his offense. What you have to do is you have to shut down that running attack and make Nico beat you with his arm, which he's fully capable of doing, mind you. He's fully capable of that. And that is why Josh Heupel is so dangerous this year, because he has this superhuman in the backfield at quarterback, but then he's also going to, he just ran for 300 yards last week. This is a team who can do a little bit of everything, and that's what makes Tennessee so dangerous. And that's why NC State needs to play a damn near perfect game, specifically with Grayson McCall. Grayson McCall has to lead this charge, and that's why Jordan Walters, the running back, is so important.
Yeah, just one more thing here, Garrett, and that is that let's also not forget we can tout Nico as much as we have, and rightfully so. But he is still a freshman.
Yes,
and
so
that's
why you want him to beat you.
There are going to be situations where you can maybe force them into mistakes and take advantage. So I agree with you that. And then the other aspect is, you just wonder how much the eyes have been open to NC State fans now that they've seen Florida State take a dive. Clemson got annihilated by Georgia. Are they starting to feel is this a rallying cry that, hey, the ACC is there to be had? Why not us? And you do start to wonder how much that could play into their minds as well. Like I said, this is going to be a really fun one.
Let's move over to the Pacific. Well,
oh boy, don't get me started on this game.
Let's move over here. I was going to go up to the Pacific Northwest, but I hit the wrong button. So we're just going to roll with this one.
Oh, I got plenty of thoughts, baby.
Let's go to Colorado at Nebraska. The renewal of a fantastic rivalry between two teams. This is the Mountain West, but this is the Big Six conference, or what was it back in the day? The Southwest Conference. I want to say it was the Southwest Conference. I can't remember.
I don't know. I don't ask questions when I don't know the answer.
Sorry, everybody. I was sort of a rhetorical question, but I was silly, and I'm just going to get roasted for that one, and I apologize. I'm live on the air, so just give me a minute, all right? God. Colorado at Nebraska, 7:30 on NBC. This is a game that last year launched Deion Sanders into the stratosphere. Deion Sanders, of course, they had just won the game against TCU, the defending runner-up into the national champion Georgia Bulldogs. This was a nasty game. Really gross. Unless you're a big fan of Colorado, but if you just want to watch a good football game, this was ugly. They beat Nebraska 36-14 in Boulder. The crowd was going crazy, but they were just now building into that crazy hype machine for Deion Sanders. And Jeff Sims, the old quarterback for Nebraska, the old quarterback for Georgia Tech, he had 4 turnovers. But on the other hand, they sacked Shedeur Sanders 8 times. I expect them to get after Shedeur Sanders again in this one. But Travis Hunter, he's also going to take center stage. He had a big game in this matchup last year. Travis Hunter might be the best pure college football player in all of America. He might be a better wide receiver than he is a cornerback, and he was a 5-star cornerback. I mean, this dude is a freak of nature. I mean, you can just use any adjective that you want to describe him, and it's probably not good enough. 132 yards, 7 catches, 3 touchdowns, while also playing the entire game on defense. This guy left the field for one snap for a breather, and then another one because his helmet popped off. Those are the 2 plays that he missed in their opener last week against North Dakota State. You can't really say enough good things about him. Shedeur Sanders, good player. I mean, he might be one of the best players in college football, the quarterback position. He gets sacked a lot, but he still goes off those 445 yards, 4 touchdowns, and it had the pick against North Dakota State. And altogether, Colorado did not look that good as a whole against a really good North Dakota State team. Jimmy Horn, he exploded in this one, the other wide receiver. They've got skill guys on the outside, but the rushing attack leaves a lot to be desired. I think that's the nicest way that you could say it. And then on defense, they still have a lot of the same glaring holes. And now on the other side, you have a Nebraska team with Dylan Raiola under center instead of the aforementioned Jeff Sims. And Matt Rule is noted as a guy who can take off in year 2 and 3 of his coaching tenures of wherever he stops off. So I think this is a Nebraska team that's going to be much improved. I still have a lot of questions as to what Colorado is going to end up being. They still have a lot of the same holes, but this is also a Nebraska team that can get after the passer really effectively. They had 9 tackles for loss in their win last week. But really the biggest difference maker is Dylan Raiola under center.
Yeah, the thing you didn't have to worry about last year, I agree with you, Garrett, and I hate to mimic so much of what you just said, but you didn't have to worry about Jeff Sims beating you through the air. You had to worry about him doing it with his legs, and it's the exact opposite this year. And there's going to be a lot asked of Travis Hunter and the rest of that Colorado defense. And quite frankly, I didn't see anything in that week 1 win over North Dakota State, even though it was a win, that made me believe this year is going to be any different than it was last year. Including, by the way, the offensive line, in which Shedeur, even on some of the touchdowns or some of the big plays, was still getting hit. And that's going to be a problem when guys are hitting you who are bigger and stronger and faster than guys that play at North Dakota State. And to me, that's the big question, is how can they possibly manage to keep Shedeur healthy throughout the course of the season? And that's also going to tie into Travis Hunter. And obviously, it would be different, right? Shedeur might be getting hit. It's just a lot of plays on a body for Travis Hunter. And you do have to wonder the toll it will take over the course of the season. Might feel fresh, might feel good here week 2, ready to roll national TV. But as we get down the road, you know, how is he holding up? But look, I've seen nothing that makes me believe this year is any different for Colorado. This is going to be a chance to prove it. I don't think Nebraska is some unbeatable opponent on the road. They're a step up, though, from North Dakota State. And on the flip side, you know, I don't think Nebraska is locked into a win here either. This one, the teams are not as good as some of the other games we've talked about, but this game might be equally as competitive, right, for a variety of reasons. But if nothing else, it feels like a must-watch game. In a lot of prime is going to feel like must-watch games, right? Between Shedeur and Travis Hunter, like I'm all in pretty much every week just to see what happens, even if the expectations are low. I just want to see what happens. And then, yeah, like especially for us here in Georgia, and we know what happened with Raiola and the back and forth there. Like, yeah, this guy's supposed to be an All-American type of quarterback. I want to see him challenge a guy like Hunter who could have NFL prospects at the cornerback position at the next level. I want to see those two guys go after it. And so I'm really excited about this game. Again, these aren't the 2 best teams in the world. I think it's going to be a pretty entertaining, fun battle. Hopefully it's not an ugly game in terms of how it looks on the field, but the other thing is just a great environment, and I'm excited to see if Nebraska can get that environment back to how it used to be when we were growing up.
I have a feeling it'll be back. Maybe not to that level of what you saw when you were growing up.
Primetime game under the lights. I think it'll be pretty rock. Yeah, it'll be pretty rock.
No, but what I'm saying is this is going to be rocking up there.
Yeah,
in Lincoln.
yeah.
So I'm very excited for this game in particular. And Dylan Raiola, him under the lights, I just want to see what it looks like. He has been a breath of fresh air for that program. Really, he is the poster child of the new generation for Matt Rule. And I mean, at the very least, this is going to be an entertaining football game with lots to talk about as soon as it finishes, no matter how it finishes. We could be talking about Deion Sanders riding high again, and maybe this year he's got it all figured out, or maybe on the other hand, Dylan Raiola is that guy and is ready for the big show. So we'll see what ends up happening with this one. Nebraska, the home team in this one, are favored by 7.5 points. I think that's a pretty big line. I don't like the idea of taking Colorado anything under 7 points or over 7 points. I would take Colorado potentially to cover that 7.5, but maybe not to win outright. But I think it just makes for it's a compelling game, one way or the other. Let's move on to our final game that we're going to get into specifically. We're going to go up to the Pacific Northwest. Like I mentioned before, Ashton Genty and the Boise State Broncos and his, what does he have, 6 touchdowns last week against my alma mater. He's going on the road, and now he's going to take it up to Eugene, Oregon, taking on the Ducks, who also had kind of they had a dogfight on their hands. Idaho, an FCS team, albeit a very talented FCS team, they gave them everything they could handle. We talked about it in the last episode of College Football Overtime. So if you subscribe or if you follow along, you definitely already saw that. But if you didn't, you can click over there and check out our reaction to that one. But this should make for a compelling game. This Boise State defense, the secondary, just got diced up by J.C. French, the Georgia Southern starting quarterback. Now you get Dylan Gabriel under center for the Ducks, a guy who kind of dinked and dunked his way to a really strong stat line that I feel like is a little bit misleading. But we'll end up seeing what happens in this one. I think it'll be another one of those compelling games that flies under the radar until it might be a little bit closer than we expected when it's all said and done.
This one is so interesting to me because Oregon has really got to move on from the stench of a very lackluster week 1 performance as a team. I think individually you look at Dylan Gabriel, right? 380 yards, 41 completions, 2 touchdowns, and you try and figure out how did this team only score 24 points? Mm-hmm. You got to run for more than 107 yards. There's no doubt about that. But the question of the day in regards to Oregon is the efficiency, because the numbers don't add up, Garrett. Like 380 yards and 24 points does not add up, especially not against an opponent like Idaho. And then the question in the matchup is, can Ashton Genty make a Heisman statement? I mean, this is – look, Boise State's not winning this game without him going nuts. Like we're not trying to make this something it's not. This is not a well-rounded team. This is not a squad that's going to go into Autzen and shock the Ducks, save for Ashton Genty doing something, I don't know, like he did last week, 260 yards and 6 touchdowns. And I'm not saying it has to be specifically that, but you have to look at this guy and say that was the best guy on the field in this game.
Yeah.
And that's what is being tasked with Boise State. Is this the kickoff of, or the end of, for that matter, of Ashton Genty's Heisman campaign? It either gets shut down or it gets kickstarted on Saturday night late on Peacock. But look, Idaho, we're not judging too much. They were only able to run for less than 50 yards as a team. So if you are going to credit one thing that Oregon did well in that game, I guess it would be stop the Idaho run game. Not that, again, they have some vaunted set of backs or anything that I'm aware of, but they did limit them on the ground in what was a close game. You might see sometimes, right, Oregon's up so much that the other team is throwing, they're not trying to run. That wasn't necessarily the case. So it's going to be really interesting. This is about Oregon reproving to the nation that they do belong in that discussion. This was a team, Garrett, that was preseason number 3 that has been talked about as in the likes of Texas and Ohio State and Georgia, and they didn't come anywhere close to showing that in week 1. This is a much better team, a dangerous team in Boise State, a team that many believe can make it to the playoffs out of the group of 5. Oregon has to be better. They have to play smarter. They have to score more than they did against Idaho. Look, I think Oregon's the better team. I think they'll find ways to win it. I think they will look much, much better. But this is kind of a prove-it game for Oregon if they really want to enter that discussion.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I mean, like, this is a game where, I mean, Oregon needs to – they'll have the rest of their season to really prove it. You just have to win and get through and do what you got to do. Boise State's a team that needs to – if they just need to keep this game close, because like you mentioned, I mean, this is a team that could legitimately vie for a bid to the college football playoff. And you do that by performances like what you had last week against Georgia Southern, where they kept it close. Georgia Southern did, and then they pulled away in the end because they had one thing that they are elite at. It's running the football. And Ashton Genty, he has to be Superman in this game if they want to win this football game. I don't think that they're going to have the horses to keep up with the offense that Dylan Gabriel and company have, and they're going to roll out in this game. And they're on the road at Eugene. I mean, you're flying. And you think about it this way. So you're Boise State. You just flew cross country to Georgia. Then you flew all the way back. Now you're going on the road again to Eugene. And then you're going to go. I mean, it's just the travel involved in this. Don't let that slip by. This is a lot of travel. This is thousands and thousands of miles of travel. This is tough on college kids. And now you're doing it. You're going on the road to Eugene, a very difficult place to play. I just have a hard time believing that it's going to convey to a strong week 2 performance. Maybe it's just also because Oregon is that talented. You got your work cut out for you. You need a lot of things to go right if you're going to pull this upset. And playing the type of dogfight game that they did against Georgia Southern, where they really had to labor at times, is going to cost them potentially. You play in that heat down there in Statesboro, Georgia. I was birthed by that heat in college, man. Like, that was insane down there, what they had to go through. And that takes a toll on your body. And that kind of thing, it's going to be felt next week against Oregon, against a really fast opponent that, they're going to pick you apart with Dylan Gabriel under center. I think it makes for an interesting game, at least at first. If things go right for Boise State early, maybe hang around and put together a good performance.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's interesting to see if Ashton Genty can get off early. If he doesn't, if he doesn't, Oregon should race out to, if they're better than they were against Idaho, a little bit more efficient, they should race out to a very comfortable lead very quickly. But there's still that chance that Ashton Genty is the best player on the field and just has a day. And that's the Hail Mary attempt for Boise State is Gentry carries it 38 times for 288 yards and 5 touchdowns. Like that's what would have to happen. But
great players, great plays, and
there is there. I mean, like, I don't think I'm stressing it too much to say there's a chance that he might be the best player on the field on Saturday night. But he has to have that sort of game. It has to be bananas, and it has to be the sort of game that's like, oh wow, like this guy could win the Heisman sort of stuff. Because if we're not at that level of performance, then Oregon's going to win this game.
It's going to be a tough one here for Boise State, but not impossible. Nothing's impossible. At least in college football, crazy things happen all the time. But let's get to our final thing. Let's give some shout outs. Abe Gordon, what you got, man?
Yeah, really unfortunate. I have to go on the negative aspect of this. But Central Arkansas got completely jobbed in a game against Arkansas State. There was 2 seconds left, and Arkansas State was ruled to have had the game-winning touchdown catch on a 7-yard pass, and the replay official confirmed the catch. And the Sun Belt Conference came out after the game here, Garrett. I don't know if you saw this or saw the video, but the Sun Belt Conference came out and said they made a mistake and it should have been ruled incomplete. And what essentially happened, now Arkansas State would have had one more play with 2 seconds left from the 7. Maybe they still complete another pass and win the game anyways. But what had happened was the replay official reviewed foot down with possession and called it a catch. He did not review completion through the act of surviving the ground or whatever stupid official terminology you want to use it. But it was very clear that he did not survive through the catch. It was very, very obvious. And the Sun Belt Conference came out and said it was a mistake. It should have been looked at differently. And you have to wonder if down the road, maybe there's communication from the game officials to the replay booth to say, hey, here's what we need you to be looking at, not this aspect, but that aspect, something that has to change. Because this is an FCS program at Central Arkansas that was completely jobbed out of a potential huge win, a moment the students, the athletes would have never forgotten. They were deprived that opportunity. So I just recognize Central Arkansas. We see you. It's a win in my book, but unfortunately not the official ones. And that's not the one that counts. So,
hey, at the end of the day, it could be worse. You could be Arkansas Pine Bluff.
Yeah.
Oh, Lordy. But one shout out I want to give real quick is the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. They got a big win over Georgia State. Their in-city rival, I guess you could say. Del McGee made his debut as a head coach of the Georgia State Panthers. And the biggest thing is that Georgia Tech is undefeated 2-0 for the first time since 2016. Also, for the first time since 2015, they're ranked number 23 in the country. Vibes are immaculate for Brent Key and company down there on the flats. Now they got to take those positive vibes up to Syracuse, where they got to take on another former Georgia coach, Fran Brown, the defensive backs coach for the Dogs last year. Now the Yellow Jackets get to enact some late revenge on former coaches that have wronged them in the past. Syracuse is no easy opponent, though. Comacord is under center up there for the Orange. He had a big week last week against Ohio, the Ohio Bobcats in that one, 350-ish yards in that one, multiple touchdowns, and Fran Brown's talking about sending champagne to Ryan Day after that one. So should make for a really compelling game there. I think Georgia Tech is a 3-point favorite in that one. It'll be a good one. ACC opener for Syracuse. But kudos to Georgia Tech for jumping into the rankings for the first time in a very long time. Anything else for you, Abe Gordon?
Yeah, I know we've been teasing it a little bit. I think we have to talk about the quarterback change taking place in Gainesville there, the Florida Gators, and necessitated by concussion protocol or necessitated by an embarrassing performance and a quarterback on the hot seat. Either way you look at it, it looks like DJ Lagway is going to be taking the reins here for the Florida Gators, at least this week against Samford. I would imagine that as long as he performs well, he will not be handing the reins back to Graham Mertz. At least if Billy Napier has any hope of keeping his job, it needs to be DJ Lagway's team moving forward. It probably should have been anyways, if we're being honest. Like, I mean, I made the joke, like, people ask me in the offseason, like, when do you think, what do you think will happen with Billy Napier? Is he on the hot seat? Is he going to get fired? And I said he should be fired if Graham Mertz takes the first snap of the season. Like, it needs to be Lagway. It wasn't, but now it is. So an opportunity to grow into what should be a comfortable game here for Lagway and move forward there as a program. But I have to imagine if you're Billy Napier trying to save your job and just how desperate times there are right now, this is Lagway's job for the rest of the season as long as he's healthy.
Oh, yeah. It should be an interesting one for Billy Napier and company. I'm interested to see what they do down the stretch because this is going to be a tough one for the Gators. Tough start against Miami. They got blasted in that one. It doesn't get a lot easier down the stretch.
You got Texas A&M coming up next, and then we know how
tough.
we know how they end. So
and we've talked a lot about that schedule, and we're not going to do that necessarily in this podcast right now. We've done it before, so that's the reason you should follow along because we have all kinds of incredible nuggets, all kinds of fun stuff. Plus, we have a good time, and I hope you are too. So, like, subscribe, follow along all season long. His name is Abe Gordon. My name is Garrett Chapman. Thank you so much for listening. College football overtime. We'll be back again after this slate of games. Enjoy the fantastic action. Week 2 is coming up next, and then we got your reaction show right after that. Like, subscribe, follow along all season long. We will see you again right here next week. Thank you so much.